Okay, let's unpack this. You shared something with us that really demands a deep dive. It's the transcript of a press conference. Pakistani officials, May 23rd, 2025.
That's right. And it came just after that, well, that awful event, 2 days before the attack on the school bus in Kuzdar, targeting kids. It's just tragic.
Truly awful. So, this briefing was clearly a response, and our mission today, our deep dive here, is really just to understand what they said in that room, right?
Exactly. We're focusing solely on this transcript. What were the core claims? What context did they provide? What specific details, evidence did they present?
Absolutely. It's about their narrative, just as it was laid out in the source. We're not adding anything else, not debating it here, just helping you understand the picture they painted.
Okay, so let's start where they started. The incident itself. They opened right up with the details of that attack in Kuzdar, morning of May 21st.
And they didn't mince words, called it a cowardly attack, emphasized it targeted innocent children. They really focused on the human cost. What were the figures they gave?
According to the briefing, yes, 7 lives lost, tragically, including 6 children, and 51 others injured.
Terrible numbers. And they framed it as more than just an attack on a bus.
Very much so. They stressed it was an attack on our values, on our education, and on the very fabric of our society, really conveying a sense of national impact.
Okay. From describing the event, the briefing then moved, wow, pretty quickly to the main accusation. Who did they say was behind it?
Directly. They pinned it on a group they called Fitna Hindustan. Now, that term, in this context, was used to mean an alleged group operating, they claimed, under the tutelage and the patronage of the Indian intelligence agency, RAW.
Right. And they presented this not as like a one-off thing?
No, definitely not. They explicitly said this attack was in continuity of a broader pattern of violence. Violence, they claimed, was sponsored by India.
And did they outline a motive for this alleged pattern, according to the officials, I mean?
They did. They listed several alleged aims to sabotage development, ignite fear amongst the population, and essentially detain the journey of peace and development.
And they brought up 1971.
Yes, explicitly. They said it was an attempt to repeat their playbook of 1971, so connecting it to that historical conflict.
Okay, so that brings us to the historical context they provided. They framed this alleged Indian state-sponsored terrorism as something quite long-standing.
Yeah, going back, they claimed, right, to Pakistan's inception, and they specifically cited the 1971 Mukti Bahini incident, the support for Bengali fighters, and calling it a very, very clear manifestation of this supposed historical pattern.
And they also mentioned their own past efforts to, well, present evidence for these claims.
They did. They referenced these dossiers containing what they called irrefutable evidence of this alleged Indian sponsorship. They said these were given to India back in 2009 at Sharm el-Sheikh, with documents apparently released in 2010 and also presented to the UN in 2015 and 2019.
And within that historical context, they singled out one particular case.
The Kubushan Yadav case, yes, from 2016. They described him as a serving Indian naval officer who, they claimed, confessed in detail to all the heinous and the nefarious acts of terrorism that he has been sponsoring funding on behalf of the state of India.
So that was presented as a sort of key historical proof point for their main argument.
Exactly. Now, fast forward to more recent times. The briefing got very specific about a pattern of attacks they claimed showed a shift in strategy, particularly from, say, April 2024 to May 2025.
A shift in strategy? What do they mean by that?
They claimed that these groups, this Fitna Hindustan, had now resorted to hitting soft targets, basically civilians and civilian infrastructure, after allegedly failing against what they called hard targets, military or state assets.
Okay. And they provided a list of incidents to back that claim up.
They did. A slide, apparently. We don't need to list every single one from the source, but maybe some key examples.
Sure. What kinds of soft targets were mentioned?
Well, they highlighted attacks targeting laborers, like 12 killed in Nushki, 21 coal miners in Duki. Also attacks specifically on barbers, several killed in Surbundur, Gwadar, and Panjgur while sleeping, apparently.
And bus passengers, too, you said?
Yes, exactly. Incidents where passengers were taken off buses and killed, mentioned Ziyarat and Barkhan. Other civilian examples included tailors killed in Kek and IED blast in Harnai.
IED, that's an improvised explosive device.
Right. And the Jafar Express attack was also on that list, which they noted targeted civilians, women, and children included.
And they brought it right back to the Kuzdar school bus attack, the one that prompted the briefing.
Yes. They presented that as the latest in this alleged continuity of the same pattern, deliberately targeting innocent civilians. It was key to arguing the Kuzdar attack wasn't isolated, but part of this larger alleged campaign.
Okay, so that sets the stage. The incident, the core allegation, the historical context, and this claimed recent pattern. Now let's dig into the specific evidence they presented in the briefing to support all this. What came first?
They started with claimed confessions from individuals they identified as surrendered terrorists of this Fitna-Tol Hindustan. They said these were self-giving confessions and acknowledgments.
And what were these alleged confessions about?
According to the officials presenting, they detailed how India is allegedly funding, planning, and carrying out the terrorist acts in Balochistan.
Did they name names?
They highlighted a couple, Sarfaraz Bengalzai, who they claimed spoke about India's involvement, meetings with Indian intelligence, being used as a pressure group.
And Adila Balagh?
Yes, they presented her case too. A young girl, they claimed, was exploited, blackmailed by this Fitna Hindustan to be used as a suicide bomber. They mentioned similar claims about others like Shari Balak and Bal Balak. This seemed aimed at showing the alleged groups as, well, quite ruthless and manipulative.
Okay, so confessions were one type of evidence. What else? They played an audio clip you mentioned.
They did. They claimed it was a conversation between someone they identified as a serving Indian major, giving the name Major Sandeep, and a terrorist supposedly captured in Jhelum back in April.
A serving Indian major, that's a huge claim. What did the officials say was in the audio? What points did they highlight?
They focused on parts allegedly discussing money, how to send it small amounts, like 100 here, there, maybe to avoid detection, but also planning for bigger operations, quoting phrases like Debernekin, Gebernekin, meaning I'm talking about lakhs, hundreds of thousands, or Debernekin, teen to teen, 3 or 4 lakh rupees.
Okay, so funding methods. Anything else?
Yeah. Also alleged talk about paying handlers. The quote was, Mennathana tumain dunga hidunga nabhai, like, I'll definitely give the payment, brother. And they highlighted phrases suggesting it was long-term and widespread, quoting things like, I'm coming for years, and the alleged major saying his net was established from Balochistan to Lahore.
Wow. So if that clip is what they claimed, it would suggest direct Indian military involvement in planning and funding.
That's certainly how it was presented, yes.
Yeah.
As pretty direct evidence.
What other kinds of evidence did they bring forward in the briefing?
They showed images and made claims about the gear, the equipment, allegedly used by these Fitna Hindustan terrorists.
What kind of gear?
They said it was very expensive U.S.-made equipment. They specifically mentioned M6 scopes, night vision devices, and sniper rifles, like the M4.
Expensive U.S.-made gear. And how did they connect that back to their main accusation against India?
Directly. They argued this equipment, which they claimed became, available in Afghanistan after the U.S. withdrawal and carried a big price, was being bought and given to the terrorists by India. They asked rhetorically, Kaun khareed ke de raha hai? Kaun ye funding karya Hindustan? Who is buying and giving this? Who's doing this funding? Hindustan, India.
Okay, so connecting alleged funding to specific capabilities. Then there was the whole information warfare angle. What was the claim there?
They asserted that India's information wing, or information arm, also works hands in glove with these terrorists and this Fitna Hindustan. A very strong claim of coordination.
And they provided examples for this alleged coordination.
Several. The pattern they tried to show was alleged Indian social media accounts posting something cryptic before an attack, and then Indian media or social media supposedly celebrating or amplifying the attack afterwards, sometimes they claimed, with incorrect details.
Like the Mianwali Air Base attack.
Exactly. November 2023. They showed alleged posts from the day before, tomorrow is a big day, and the morning of, good morning, Mianwali. Then claimed Indian media glorified it with inflated damage reports.
And the Karachi attack involving Chinese nationals in October 2024.
Similar alleged pattern. Posts from what they called raw affiliated accounts saying big day in the next few hours before the attack, followed by, they claimed, online celebrations celebrating it that we have hit the Chinese.
Jafar Express, Kuzdar attack, same alleged template.
That's what they presented. For Jafar Express, March 25, alleged pre-attack posts like, keep an eye on Pakistan today and tomorrow, then post-attack statements linking it to Kashmir. They even showed a video, apparently released by a BLA media wing on May 19th, showing the train hijacking itself.
And for the Kuzdar attack, the one that started all this?
Again, they showed screenshots. Alleged Indian social media posts reporting the attack with very early timestamps, 7:58 a.m., 8:05 a.m., 8:07 a.m. on the day, followed by claims that Indian electronic media celebrated it, even reporting incorrect details like claiming it was an army bus near Quetta.
So the argument was these timings and the subsequent coverage proved a connection, A nexus.
Precisely. That was the word they used, nexus. They claimed India was creating a fake perception, referencing Disinfolab's work as well. And they showed pictures, apparently, of spokespersons for these alleged Fitna Hindustan groups appearing on Indian TV channels.
That's quite a detailed accusation on the information front. Did they present anything else? What about individuals, like the alleged leaders?
Yes, that was another category of evidence. They showed images again, claiming that alleged leaders of not just Fitna Hindustan, but also another group they called Fitna Khawarij, receive medical treatment in India.
Medical treatment in India. Did they provide specifics?
They did. They named several individuals and alleged locations or circumstances. Aslam Achu, supposedly at Max Hospital, India, using an Afghan passport. Bashir, also allegedly treated in India with an Afghan passport. Dr. Ala Nazar claimed to have an India visa or entry. Khalil, identified as chairman, allegedly at Apollo Hospital, India. And Malik Faridun, supposedly at a premier Indian hospital.
And the interpretation they put on this?
They framed it as India recovering its assets when these alleged leaders get injured.
Okay. And finally, they cited public statements made by people in India.
Right. Various figures, retired military analysts, politicians, presented as further evidence of intent or policy.
What kind of statements did they highlight?
Some, they claimed, promoted destabilization. Mentioned a retired Indian general supposedly howling about Balochistan's separation. Quoted an alleged security expert suggesting payments for killing Pakistani officers by rank like 1 crore agar apne 2-star general ko niptaya. 1 crore rupees if you take out a 2-star general.
Strong words.
Any others? Yeah, a retired Indian Army chief allegedly talking about promoting Indian influence, shifting to defensive offense, using terrorists through terrorists, and linking Mumbai 2008 to Balochistan with the line, "You can do one Mumbai, you may lose Balochistan."
And political figures.
They referenced India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, allegedly thanking Baloch citizens for support and stating an aim to free them, and also supposedly mentioning RAW conveying aims to insurgents. And they referred to PM Modi's alleged daily basis threats, particularly concerning Balochistan.
So these statements were all woven into their narrative as proof of Indian intentions aligning with the alleged action.
Exactly. It painted a picture from their perspective of consistent hostile intent and action, supported by various types of alleged evidence.
Okay. So that covers the claims and the evidence they presented. Now, let's flip to the other side of the coin presented in the briefing. Pakistan's own response and perspective. What was the main message about Pakistan's stance?
Well, a very strong theme was resolve. The firm resolve of the state, the people. They kept saying things like, they will not succeed, and our response will be decisive.
They even showed a video clip.
Yes, of a father who'd lost daughters in an attack, expressing defiance, saying, attack as adults, not the children. It was meant to convey resilience.
And they backed this up with data on their actual counterterrorism efforts.
They did. Gave statistics for Jan 24 to May 25. Over 4,600 incidents nationwide, over 1,600 of those in Balochistan. And a huge number of operations, over 93,000 nationally, with more than half, over 52,000, in Balochistan alone during that period.
Any figures on results, like terrorists neutralized?
Yes. According to the briefing, they claimed 1,018 killed in 2024, 233 in Balochistan, and 747 killed so far in 2025, with 203 of those in Balochistan.
And how did they describe how they conduct these operations?
Their main approach, they said, is intelligence-based operations, IBOs. Claimed they do over 150 daily. Presented it as an effective method to target terrorists who they say are embedded in the population while trying to minimize harm to civilians.
Beyond operations, did they mention broader strategies?
Yes. Specifically, the National Action Plan, the NAMP, said it was revitalized, with efforts on all domains, socioeconomic, legal, CT ops, information, the whole lot.
Any other measures mentioned?
Briefly, yeah. Things like pushing out illegal Afghans, tackling the terror crime nexus, and closing down illegal trades, part of a wider clampdown, it seemed.
Now, they spent quite a bit of time specifically on Balochistan and the Free Balochistan narrative. How did they address that?
Very directly. Rejected it completely. Called it a hollow slogan. Claimed it was funded by India, used the phrase, Hindustan ke bana hoa bayan, a narrative built on Indian money. Argued it goes against Baloch culture and tradition. Said these groups have no place in Pakistan.
And what did they present as the alternative picture, the reality in Balochistan, according to them?
They really pushed socioeconomic development. Said the province was at a takeoff point. They listed several projects, Rekodik mining starting up, the Blue Economy Coastal Plan, Green Pakistan Initiative, The Kachi Canal expansion benefiting agriculture, massive growth claimed in road networks.
From just a few hundred kilometers to over 25,000.
That was the claim, yeah. Plus, improvements in healthcare dialysis centers, hospitals, trying to paint a picture of progress.
And education, too.
Yes. Cited figures like 73,000 Balak students on fully funded scholarships. Mentioned the number of cadet colleges, technical institutes, all presented as investment.
And they countered the deprivation narrative with examples of successful Balaf individuals.
Right. They named names Abdul Samad Yarjang, a space scientist, someone who became Oxford Union president, Aisha Zeri, a deputy commissioner, Shahzain, presented these as the real face of Balochistan.
And they emphasized the connection of Balaf people to the rest of Pakistan.
Definitely. Talked about shared culture, intermarriage, Balak communities across the country like in Karachi, mentioned sacrifices for the nation, citing LTL Hengarmari, argued the political leadership in Balochistan has always been Balak or Bravi, refuting marginalization claims.
What about the missing persons issue? It's often raised in relation to Balochistan. How did they address it in this briefing?
Their claim was that the lists often include people who've actually been killed fighting as terrorists or who have surrendered.
So the core message on Balochistan, as they presented it here,
was basically, this Fitnatul Hindustan has nothing to do with the real Balochistan. It's actually against Balochistan's progress.
Yeah.
And the Baloch people know these groups are their enemies. A direct counter-narrative.
Okay. Beyond Balochistan, they also framed Pakistan's overall approach. You mentioned a rational, responsible actor.
Yes, that was the framing. They explicitly contrasted Pakistan's approach, which they described as rational, handling things through a mix of operations, development, diplomacy, narrative, with what they termed India's illogical, irrational, unilateral actions. They referenced a specific May 6th, 7th incident as an example of that contrast.
And they drew a line on certain actions.
Said Pakistan wouldn't engage in irrational acts like attacking civilians or significantly religious sites in India, stated clearly Pakistan would never do that.
Yeah.
It was about projecting a responsible image.
Okay. And wrapping up, the briefing touched on a few other specific points or accusations floating around.
Yeah, a few denials and clarifications. They addressed claims about Pakistan attacking Sikh holy sites, like the Golden Temple.
How did they respond to that?
Dismissed it completely. Emphasized Pakistan's respect for Sikhs, mentioned protecting and facilitating access to places like Nankana Sahib, Kartarpur. They actually flipped the accusation, claiming India had attempted attacks near Sikh areas, calling the claims against Pakistan a sinister design, a lie.
They also mentioned a specific phrase, Operation Sindoor, attributed to India's defense minister.
Yes, and his comment about a trailer, film remaining, they essentially brushed it off as empty threats. Said Pakistan is ready for escalation, but reiterated Pakistan is for peace.
Water was another point, concerns about water supply being threatened.
Addressed that too. Called the idea of cutting off water for over 240 million people crazy. Said the government's stance was clear.
And finally, the use of Afghanistan.
Yes, they repeated the claim that India is using Afghan soil to export terrorism into Pakistan. And they included a direct message to the interim government in Afghanistan, basically. Don't be a tool for India's alleged destabilization design. Focus on trade and prosperity with Pakistan instead.
So that really covers the breadth of what was presented in this press conference based on the transcript you provided.
It does. A very detailed presentation of their side of the story.
Right. So just to quickly recap for everyone listening, the officials in this May 23rd briefing laid out a very clear, very detailed narrative. They blamed the Kuzdar school bus tragedy and what they presented as a pattern of similar attacks squarely on groups allegedly backed by India.
And they offered up various pieces of what they termed evidence to support this claimed confessions.
Yeah.
That audio clip of the alleged major, the expensive equipment, the alleged media coordination, even claims about militant leaders getting medical treatment in India.
And on the other side, they portrayed Pakistan's response as firm but rational. Focused on counterterrorism ops, yes, but also heavily emphasizing socioeconomic development, especially in Balochistan, and pushing back hard against narratives like Free Balochistan.
Contrasting their own measured approach, as they see it, with what they described as irrational actions and threats from the other side. Stressing resolve, but also a desire for peace on their terms.
So you've just heard a deep dive into one side's perspective on an incredibly complex and, frankly, very tense situation, drawn directly from the source material, the specific press conference transcript. In a world just flooded with competing claims, state narratives, Well, this gives you a structured look at the specific arguments, the evidence, as presented by these officials in this briefing.
And it's interesting, isn't it? The officials here really hammered home the point that they deal in facts and logic, while their opponents, they claim, use propaganda and lies.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener. When you have governments on opposing sides of a conflict making such diametrically opposed accusations, both claiming truth, both calling the other side liars, how do you navigate that? How do you critically evaluate what's put in front of you as fact versus what might be propaganda? It's a real challenge in today's information landscape, something definitely worth thinking about.